Welcome to Simply Walk the Talk. Our bodies and minds adapt to what we do most of the time. If you want to change your body and mind, you must change what it is you do most of the time. This podcast explores all things health, wellness, fitness, lifestyle, and biohacking. Stay tuned as we explore various thoughts, methods, and experiences from a multitude of conversations between our interesting guests and experts through many fields of work. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Simply walk the talk. Simply walk the talk.
Anders Murman.
Hi.
Murman. Yeah, is that how you say it?
That's how we say in Sweden, Murman. Or Murman.
Murman. Or Merman. We had a little joke about that earlier.
Merman. Merman.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I was introduced to you by a good friend, Anders Olsen.
Yeah.
And with Conscious Breathing. So he's been on the show, and if you follow me, you've probably seen a lot of content with the Relaxator and the Body Stream and a bunch of different cool devices. But the fact that I'm here in Stockholm, in Sweden, we figured why not use this opportunity to also speak to you about some of the cool things you're doing. So you're a tech mogul, right? Someone that's in tech. And I am a big fan of all things tech. However, I'm also a fan of sort of the primitive ancestral wisdom, and I like blending the two.
Yeah.
And so people who follow my show know that they can expect the unexpected, right? So sometimes I might be talking about taking off your shoes and climbing trees and rolling on the ground, or I might have people like yourself on the show.
Yeah.
So let's start with your background. Let's talk about, how you got to where you are, and then we'll talk about this cool device that we have on the table.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Josh. So I'm Anders Murman. I'm 55 years old. I'm a Swedish citizen. I've lived all my life in Sweden, in Uppsala, north of Stockholm, except for 2 years when I lived in the Bay Area in San Francisco. All my life, I've been working in medical technology. I've been building products for medical use. Primarily, by training, I have a master's degree in engineering physics, and I'm a particle physicist. My plan as I was young was to go into nuclear science, but then I happened to do civil service. I didn't want to do military service back in the 80s. So I did civil service as an accelerator engineer at the radiation therapy department in Sweden. And then I thought, radiation therapy of cancer, that would be nice to have a job in. And I finished my studies, and I got a job there. And then I worked in that field for 21 years.
Wow.
Sell building products, planning systems for treatment planning systems for radiation therapy for hospitals around the world. And I've been to many of the great hospitals in the US, actually selling systems there, like MD Anderson, Mass General, Presbyterian, those Memorial, to mention a few in New York.
Of course.
And then I was kind of 45 years old, this is 10 years ago. I had the best job in the world, I thought. And I was behaving, my wife said, you're behaving like a 65-year-old. I was doing crosswords and I was playing golf because I didn't have any challenge. So I actually jumped ship, got headhunted into a company, a CTO in a company called Aerocrine. We were building breathalyzers to detect the degree of inflammatory asthma in your bronchial tree. So I got into suddenly building hardware again. I've been building software for 20 years. And I got into physics. I got into gas sensors, and I started to study gas. What kind of molecules do you breathe out, and how can we detect them? And I would say I'm a world expert on that.
Wow.
So, and then I jumped ship also again. I started working for a couple of startups, like when I was younger in my hometown, one in alcoholic relapse prevention, and another one in pharmacology. And then eventually I was asked by one of the companies I were working for, could you look at this thing called ketones? Could you look if you could measure acetone? And I had never heard that word. This was 2015, so 8 years ago. So I actually was paid to make a project. How would you build that kind of device? And then a few more years passed, and then suddenly I had funding for starting my company, our company, Deversify. I'm the co-founder together with my wife. And we've been building on that since.
First of all, it's a very decorated background. So it's amazing and incredible. And I think it goes to show the reason why it's important to have you here, because you're an expert in measuring these molecules or these gases. When I hear the word acetone, at least in the past, I mean, I know it now, but in the past, I would think of like paint, nail remover, right? Mm-hmm. So could you maybe explain to the person out there who's maybe thinking the same thing, like, well, why would you be measuring acetone if it's in, nail
That's
remover?
my typical joke when I explain this. Is either you've been drinking nail polish remover, a bottle of that, or you're in ketosis. Acetone, you don't get acetone in your body in any other means in your bloodstream than by having been in ketosis. And what is being in ketosis? Let me explain, particularly to your American viewers, which kind of correlates keto with carnivore diets. It's not. Keto is a natural evolutionary process that ketosis or ketogenesis is a natural evolutionary process we all human animals have in our liver. And that means in that process, it takes the fatty acids from our bloodstream, and the liver's mitochondria breaks it down into 3 different molecules. That's keto. And one is the blood ketones, the beta-hydroxybutyrate. The blood ketones, they can drive the brain cells as well as the muscle cells. They can drive any cell in the body without any insulin or albumin or any other thing. It's the most natural type of energy we have. And to do that, again, you have to eat fat or have fat in your storage, and you get it into the bloodstream and get it to the liver and get into ketosis. And then there are 2 other molecules that also are produced as a residue of that process that the liver does. And one is called acetoacetate. We can forget about that one.
Acetoacetate.
Yeah, acetoacetate. That is kind of close to BHB, and it measures with urine sticks. Right, that you can test. It's kind of a very imprecise way of measuring it. And it is not, that molecule doesn't say anything. Acetone doesn't say anything else either, but acetone is the 3rd molecule, and that is the residue, the fumes of this hybrid engine, if you will. And those fumes, the acetone, 1 molecule per triglyceride that you've broken down, 1 acetone comes into the blood, and then it is ventilated out of the body through your lungs, because it's not used for anything. So it has a half-life in your blood of 30 minutes. So if you have a high value on this device called Acetrack, because of acetone and RaySearch and all that. So it's a play words. But the Acetrack measures acetone, and that is an answer if your body has starting to energize itself using fatty acids than carbs.
Beautiful. Beautiful explanation. I want to maybe bring it back a little bit or slow it down for those who maybe didn't catch all of that, right? Yeah. Because the 3 things that are converted from being in ketosis is the blood, the urine, and the gas, right?
And the breath. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But let's talk about maybe the reason why this might be more important than taking the blood or doing a urine stick. Like, is there a certain efficacy, or is it simply convenience? What are the differences?
Differences, yeah, absolutely. Many of your listeners are biohackers. Many of our customers in Europe, we're mainly European based. We have just recently started selling throughout the whole world. They're the same around the world, and they are, many times already been doing blood glucose, blood ketones. They have the Oura ring, they have the CGM maybe. And then why would I need this one? Well, first of all, this one has this has the possibility to replace many of them eventually, but I wouldn't recommend that from the beginning. From the beginning, typically our users measure their blood glucose, either a prick in the finger or a CGM. And they measure blood ketones, and you do that with sticking your finger and using this device, typically Ketomojo, for example, the rich one. But those, if you look at blood ketones, that is just an average value of how much ketone bodies you have been both producing and consuming over the last 24 hours. Right. While Acetrack, measuring on acetone, that's an immediate measure. That is, again, measuring on the fumes of the engine. If you're going up a hill or if you're really producing ketone bodies in your liver, we'll see that within 10 minutes, 10 minutes to 1 hour. So the values go up and down a lot during the day. Again, if you measure, and then of course it's non-invasive. You can measure as much as you want, and it's one cost, and you can measure for your whole life. This device has lasted at least 5 years, my personal one. It's a cost-efficient way of doing it, and it's non-invasive. It also gives you answers that you really don't get. For example, I stopped eating anything after 9 o'clock in the evening. And I've learned that over the last few years because I have the device. Because if I eat even peanuts at 10 o'clock in the evening, I'm out of ketosis the next morning. While if I don't, I'm typically in it. So that is, of course, because of you need these long fasting windows, as I'm sure you're aware, somewhere during the day.
Mm-hmm.
My personally is that stop eating early in the evening, and then I will be in keto the next morning. But that you wouldn't see with the blood sampling, because that will only give you kind of statistically over time these details, but we see the details immediately.
This reminds me of, and I don't want to get too caught up on brand names and things like that, because I know you're very good at not comparing or bashing, but it does remind me of a breathalyzer device that I've used for some time, actually for I think a couple of years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was really cool because, like what you just talked about, it's non-invasive. It's something I would measure almost every single morning,
yeah,
and maybe measure at some point throughout the day or before I go to bed. Because like you, I always suggest to consume nothing 2 to 3 hours before bed.
Yeah.
And then I do intermittent fasting. So right now I'm fasted. Yesterday I was with Anders, and he heard me say that I think you picked me up around 5 p.m. or no, it was later than that, right? It was 6. Yeah. He picked me up around 6 o'clock, and I still hadn't eaten anything all day long. So it was almost 24 hours of fasting yesterday. And I wish I had the Acetrack to measure my ketones, but it's not that you need to have it to know what the number is. I think it's for people like myself who's curious on where you are, or, if you maybe have a medical condition, you want to know what your ketone levels are. I do it simply because I'm curious and I like to track. But what are some other uses for this? What can this tell you besides you are producing ketones or not?
We started off selling to biohackers, and of course that being one part, we're selling to ultra marathoners and ultra sporters, because they really need to know if they can, during the race, switch over to energy consumption from fats rather than carbs. Otherwise, it's hard to consume that much. But the main market for us in Europe, particularly here in Scandinavia, has been middle-aged men and particularly women. Middle-aged women go through menopause. They've been yo-yo banding all their life. They get sicker and sicker. They're walking down the metabolic scale towards metabolic syndrome, towards diabetes type 2, towards rheumatism, towards many of different things of the great lifestyle diseases that we have, unfortunately, to obesity. They've been fooled by the system that we have good food, which we don't. We eat too much ultra-processed food, which too much sugar, that will slowly kill us. That's the honest truth. And this is also really the passion behind the company Deversify. We want to help everyone understand their own health. And we're also selling educations around metabolic health. Those that are already healthy, like you're more curious, and that's interesting. But these people will prolong their lives if they first get educated. Then eventually, maybe 2 months later, they buy an Acetrack and they start measuring. These people are many times very insulin resistant. They will have to do fasting for a long time. They will have to go low carb a long time, and then maybe after 2 more months, one morning, I have many of these explanations from our customers. This lady, 60 years old, she has been having under 10 parts per million every morning for 2 months. And then one morning she has 50. Like that signal, that hallelujah moment.
Wow.
It's like, yes, now I know what works for me, because we're all, the human animal, we are omnivores, we're the best omnivores there is. But we're not built to eat all of those macronutrients at the same time. But we're also individuals. Epigenetics and all that. You have to find what your solution is to get into ketosis. It's not really easy to get into ketosis if you've been eating bad food all your life.
Right.
And so you get it. Then they can throw it away, because then they've learned something. Joking a little bit, but it's not a device that you're necessarily going to have all your life, but it will help you in your time of need. For those people. And those are the ones that we particularly are interested to sell that. But as you mentioned, there are a lot to be learned before they can get there. I hope your podcast can also spread that word. So look, you have to start to teach yourself about what's important to improve your health, and that's all the parts of functional medicine. It's the breathing, it's the stress, it's the sleeping, it's the exercise. But me being an expert on diet and nutrition, that is a key factor. What's making us sick is ultra-processed food.
Yeah, it's what this sort of technology has done for me. Again, I in full disclosure, have not used Acetrack yet. So today will be the first moment that I get a chance to use it, but I have looked into it, and I think it's going to be really cool to use. But what I've learned from using other devices, other breathalyzer devices, it allowed me to kind of backtrack what I did the day before, or, the moments before, to allow me to have certain good numbers, so to speak.
Yeah.
I like it as almost like a accountability measure, or accountability partner. And then as a health coach, when I have clients, if I want to, I'm traveling right now on tour, obviously I can't be face to face with a lot of my clients that are in the States or, elsewhere. But maybe if I have them using Acetrack or some form of technology like this, it allows me to still work with them from afar to say, okay, well, let's adjust this, let's adjust that. Maybe you've been fasting way too much, or maybe you haven't fasted enough. Mitigate your stress levels by learning how to breathe properly. So there's a number of things I think we can learn from this, as you pointed out. And this is why I wanted to have you on the show, because this simple tool, it looks simple. There's a lot of complex algorithms within it, I'm sure. But this simple tool is something that could transform someone's life, and that's what we're here to do. What I'd like to do now is, I guess, unless we want to talk about anything else, because I know there's a lot of information that we could go down, we could go down rabbit holes, but I wanted to keep this short. But if there's anything else that you would like to discuss around this before we actually use it, then please let me know.
Yeah, I like to connect to what you just said, because and we haven't really talked about this before we started recording. So that's impressive of you, because I think you have summarized really well what our mission is. We have this controversial idea that lifestyle diseases are best treated with lifestyle changes, which is, it's so stupid that it's controversial, but it is a little bit. And you need tools. You need a little tool to help you if you see if your lifestyle change has worked or not, particularly when it comes to nutrition, because or even breathing or stress. But in nutrition, there's so much myths. You may think you're a fit guy. You may think that you're in ketosis many times, but I'm sure that many of those times you've eaten too little fat. You have too little fat in your body, so you're in starvation. So you've been starting to convert your own muscle protein into glucose. Things like that you can't feel that. Right. You have to measure it, and if you can do it without drawing blood, those kind of tools is what my mission is and what our mission is to provide. So, right, lifestyle changes.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah. So, we've got the device here. It's a very good looking device. It's very sleek. Clearly, this is where you put your mouth. But let's go over it. Let's talk about it, because I think there's an app that is associated with this, right? That's the main driver.
That's an app. It's connected. This one is pretty dumb in itself. It's designed that way, and all the smartness is in the app. So what it does is what's unique with our breathalyzers, including all the commercial breathalyzers, including alcohol breathers, is that we have built-in a pressure sensor inside of it. Because what I learned at my previous jobs is that the most important, the primary factor of any sampling of breath is not how good sensor you have, it's how you breathe, and that you do it in the same manner every time. So we control how you exhale. We force you to exhale at the same pressure for 6 full seconds. And it's gamified. You look at the screen, and it's like SingStar. You have to get it to breathe exactly the way it will. And then you measure yourself in the same manner every time. And hopefully from the bottom of your lungs, where the acetone is actually excreted from the blood. That's how it works. It's not that complex. You get a number and you store it, and you have your own, get your own curve. But it's actually the individual numbers that tell you most before lunch, at least. My highest values are there. I learned that if I'm in ketosis at all during 24 hours, it's typically the last hours before I wake up. That's when it's producing the ketones in my case. As my younger people tend to have higher values in the evening if they have it at all.
So this is good, because I know one of the common questions that people are going to ask, or probably thinking right now, is, well, what's a good number, right? Mm-hmm. And I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's more about the trending of the numbers as opposed to the actual number itself. right? But can you talk about like what is a good value?
Good value. So we measure also. We're only device that measures using the physics scale of gas measurements, and that's parts per something, parts per million of acetone. So we have calibrated all these. They're all pre-calibrated. So a number under 10 parts per million (ppm) is not ketosis typically. It's all individual, and of course you have to find your own curve. And a number over 25 ppm is ketose, and somewhere 10 to 25, it's a light ketosis, we typically say. But I would have to stress that when you buy an Acetrack, don't start draw conclusions immediately. Wait, do the same measurement maybe every morning, just as you wake up, before you drink coffee or brush your teeth, and the same thing right after, before you go to bed, before you brush your teeth. And do that for a full week, and then you will get some kind of indication, and then it goes very much up and down during the day. I'm never in ketose. I never produce ketone bodies during the day, almost never ever, unless I'm fully fasting, like water fasting. But for other people, it could be. So it could be interesting to also add right before dinner and right before lunch measurements. But then again, comparing those, and then suddenly you get surprised. Wow, I thought I was in ketosis and I have 3. And suddenly, well, I didn't think I had, you know, all this bad food last night. Well, you could still be in ketosis the next morning. It is surprising how the body kind of controls how it want to energize itself. And this is all driven by the brain, and it's all autonomous. So you can't really, it's hard to hack it. But if you measure it, I guess you can start to do that. But even so, it could be you eat a lunch out, you eat salad, and then in the dressing, they have the sugar. Of course, this sneaked in sugar, and then you suddenly go out for 12 hours of ketosis. It's things like that you can detect as a biohacker.
And jumping on that, also lack of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Stress.
Yes.
Right? Like those things severely. I mean, I noticed when I would use a CGM, like it would make those numbers change dramatically. Less insulin sensitive when I didn't sleep well. Right? And then also I liked to measure the difference between like a strength training, high intensity, tough workout versus a long endurance workout, and the difference between those two, right? I thought that was kind of interesting. So as you can imagine, I'm probably going to be doing some of those.
Yeah, you're going to do the testing. And what our, athletes that have been testing this and, posting it on Instagram and so on, they witness the same thing. Long distance training will not necessarily get you to ketosis very much. What you need, if you want to exercise you to ketosis, which is really hard, it's much easier to do fasting or just go low carb. But if you want to do it with exercise, it's weightlifting and really hard muscle training, because the muscles will, if you deplete your glycogen stores very much quicker, if you really burn them out, that will be a signal to the evolutionary brain saying that, that was a quick dip in our stored glycogen resources. Yeah. We probably have to switch over to fat mode now. Yeah. While if you have a slow thing out there, we're probably going to get some, living a long life. The brain has learned that, it seems like we have access to glucose all the time here. While evolutionary, 12,000 years ago, before we domesticized wheat, we hadn't glucose or fructose available more than once a year in the temperate zone of the world. I mean, we populated the whole world, from Greenland to the jungle, absolutely, and we can live with anything. But most of the people have been in these areas where humanity started to grow, and there weren't any season really for easily accessible glucose at all during the year, except in the fall. So the brain is wired to not be fed glucose all the time, but if it has been that, then it will rely on that also, and not necessarily. And then I would like to add, the brain is a greedy banker. The brain doesn't want to release its storage of fat, because eventually, if things get really rough and there's no food during winter, the brain loves ketone bodies. It's the best thing. You don't need insulin, you don't need anything. So if nothing else, the brain wants to save fat on your body to the very end to make the brain itself survive. Exactly. So it's you need to trick your body to start releasing your excess fat.
Agreed. Well, before we wrap up, I am also curious your thoughts on exogenous ketone consumption while using this, and maybe the benefits or the disadvantages of doing so.
Yes, exogenous ketones, that's an important thing to mention. Then you have kind of jumped over the process that I explained earlier in the liver. So then you don't produce acetone.
Interesting.
So that is just adding it directly to your food and into your bloodstream. So we will not notice that with Acetrack, just so you know. So that if you want to control your blood ketones using exogenous, you have to do it with blood salt.
Aha.
So that's I usually take this analogy of our body as this hybrid car, and where the ketone part is the electric part, and then using Acetrack is seeing if you're plugged in and charging a battery, while doing blood ketone test is to see how much charge do I have in the battery right now. Go with me. So adding to that analogy, eating exogenous ketones would mean you just add to the charge of the battery.
Interesting. And I guess one way you could hack that, though, is if you allow the exogenous ketones. So for those who don't know, it's just taking in some form of, ketone ester or ketone salt or something like that. If you allow that to extend your fast, then maybe that would be a reason why you could see a better score here.
Yeah, and also if you eat exogenous ketone, many would witness that. I forgot that, but that will keep your brain continuing. Great. This is what we should continue with.
Yeah.
We're also, our body tend to continue with what it's been doing. So once you're in keto, you can stay there longer, I think, without breaking out. I'm all for that.
Cool.
And then so again, for people that are metabolically healthy and not obese or anything like that, but they want to be in ketosis for neurological reasons, like in epileptic, then exogenous ketones is very important.
Awesome. So if you're watching this video, stay tuned because I'm going to add this in at the end so you can see exactly how to set up the app, get this going, and we'll see what I measure out at right now. Anything else you'd like to mention about what you're doing and where you see the company headed in the future?
Absolutely. So the company is, right now very busy, fulfilling orders. We actually sold out right now. So this is the last unit I can give to you for now. We're getting more units next week because we had a good few months recently. We're also selling these educations, this education platform around metabolic health that we are going to translate into English and German and start offering in other countries and in Sweden. But we also have a new breathalyzer project. When we invested in this breathalyzer platform, the mouthpiece, the Bluetooth connections, the app, and of course the sensors, the pressure sensor, all of that is an investment we already made. And then we could change the sensor inside from acetone to some other molecule, we can detect more molecules. And it's by detecting methane and hydrogen.
Yes.
And we can start looking at gastric disorders, particularly a disease called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is growing really fast right now.
Yeah.
The diagnostics for that you can't even do with blood sampling. You have to do it with breathalyzing. And that's a very lengthy procedure, tricky procedure, and you send it over to a gas chromatograph and all that. That entire diagnostics is built. We have built a platform for that. So we are, we're destined to build that product. But this is also a time to IBS, to lactose intolerance. I mean, look at it. Isn't it unreasonable that you once in life take one blood sampling? Now I'm not going to drink milk or eat cheese for the rest of my life.
Right.
While your inner wall of your small intestine, the cells there, are exchanged every 3 days.
Right.
So you can, with lifestyle changes, you could probably improve your lactose intolerance. But again, if you have a device that can show you how much lactose intolerant am I today, that would be nice.
That's huge. I'm so glad.
I think we think it's huge, and this device doesn't exist on the world market just yet. So we want to do that.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because maybe we have another opportunity to bring you back on the show and talk about some of the new developments. But that's major, and I really wish you guys the best. And I'm so happy that you're having a good opportunity to grow the company because it's cool, right? We need more of this out there. All right, so on the show, every show, I usually ask 2 questions. First question is, what are your top 2 pet peeves? Like, what are 2 things that kind of just annoy you about things? It doesn't have to be about Acetrack or nutrition or anything, but just in general. Like, what are a couple things that just kind of get under your skin?
Wow, I'm a pretty calm guy. But yeah, well, what gets me under the skin is, of course, the first thing that would come to mind is that all the myths that are flourishing on the internet, which is, me as a physicist, I feel it terrible that, for example, diets are getting politicized.
Yeah.
And then we don't go back to facts. And the facts is that we have this body and we can run it just as well on glucose and fats. But then it becomes politicized, and we don't. I want to get into the carnivore versus the vegans and all of that. Yes, disturbs me, but people don't go back to basic facts, and that goes with politics in general. And the second thing, well, I guess that is close to that. But what disturbs me and worries me are the fact that people come off with all these lies. And I'm personally very much. I think it's poisoning our society that people come away with obvious lies.
Yeah,
all the time.
Yeah, those are two really good ones and very important. I agree. There's a lot of misinformation, and there's a lot of, it's simply to line the pockets of the powers that be, right? And there's almost always a sort of a money agenda that is attached to it, and science evolves, we evolve as people. And so this information, sometimes the information that we adhere to today is old information from when the world was very different than what it is right now. I agree.
Yeah, and looking at saturated fats, for example. Yeah. That's based on, some study in Finland in the 40s. That whole myth comes from there. Yeah. Read all those books. There's a number of good books I would like to advise on later.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Okay, and then the last question. One of my favorite questions, especially because I love what it brings up in the people that I have on the show, but also what it can do for those who are listening and watching. What is something you're most grateful for?
Well, I'm grateful for my family, obviously, and beside that, I have a great sprawling family. Everyone is well and healthy. I'm grateful for being able to provide tools that actually, I'm grateful actually for that thing that I by chance have gotten into the chance to help with things that are much more important. I worked 21 years in cancer, as I said. Didn't move the needle very much, to be honest. I did good things. I think that I'm grateful that we can, as a fairly old guy, could start, hopefully do some changes here. I'm grateful for that. We have that you can pivot in life.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, before we sign off, can you let people know the best ways to keep track of Acetrack and yourself and the company and everything you're doing? Can you let people know?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to look into getting an Acetrack, you go to getacetrack.com. In the show notes here, we will have a discount code coming up. We haven't decided on that one, but you can see it in the show notes and on the YouTube notes as well, I'm sure. So getacetrack.com, you can read more about that. That's it. It's easy.
Are you guys on social media or Instagram?
We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn. I'm not really on Twitter. So Instagram is our best channel at this point.
Is it just Acetrack?
And it's Get Acetrack on all those.
Get Acetrack.
Someone had picked up Acetrack.com, so we have a Get Acetrack. It's really simple. We're drop shipping around the world. We've been selling to New Zealand, Australia, Canada, all around the world most recently, based on another podcast that I joined a month ago. So.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you to the listeners and the viewers. Again, stay tuned with the show notes because we're going to provide all the information there. And also, you can watch me do my first breathalyzer. Okay, so this is we just signed up and registered on the app.
Yeah.
So we've got the app here on the phone. You just hooked me up with some mouthpieces.
I put on a new mouthpiece. It comes with separate of those. And then, it's really simple. You start the app, and every time you want to measure, you get into this screen. We will show you that, I guess, more in graphical details. But here right now, it's a little game that is playing. And as you exhale into the device in real time, no lagging, we will show you the pressure. First time you do it, people may absolutely fail because you may accidentally start to inhale suddenly in your exhalation. Then it will break immediately because that is that is a non-valid sample. Secondly, you may actually run out of breath because you breathe too hard in the beginning and you run out of breath, and then you don't get to the end of the 6 seconds of green line you want to get here. So then we'll just restart if that fails. I mean, no pressure here. But once you've done it once, everyone gets it every time, ever after. It's like biking.
Okay, so 6 seconds, and
yeah,
I just do a soft inhale.
No, yeah, soft inhale. Actually, it should supposed to be your tidal inhale. It's not really, because you don't want to get ambient air to test now, because that one doesn't have acetone. If you have acetone, it will come from the bottom of your lungs. So you just try to. But now, for the first time, we're going to try this. A small inhale, so you have something to breathe, and then think of start weak, like you would blow through a straw or something.
Perfect. Okay, and then if you could just point that straight at the camera, because I have this screen on, like, so almost exactly like that, yeah. And then you can see this as well. Okay, so ready?
Yeah. Too hard. Yeah. Great. You have to go to the green. Slow. Yeah, that's higher. Yeah. More green. A little slower. A little lower. Yes. First time,
we did it. Okay.
And then you make sure you don't have. It will take you maybe 30 seconds to do the analysis, because you'll have to sink in the last piece of exhalation you get that is from the lowest part of your lungs, and that will then sink in over this semiconducting sensor we have for acetone, and then eventually get you a number. So 6 parts per million. That is expected for fit man like you do not necessarily be driving during the day. It doesn't really say very much. It's what time is it? It's 12 o'clock.
11.
As I said, even me with a lot of excess fat, not a lot, but a lot more than you, because there's a lot of top hormones dominating your body. Not necessarily only insulin. It could be cortisols or adrenaline or dopamine, or any of those top hormones will kick you out of the keto. Save the measurements, and now you have done your first measurements, and then you will build. You will build your curve as you go along.
Perfect. Easy peasy. This is Josh signing out from Simply Walk the Talk. Peace.
Simply walk the talk.
Walk the talk, talking facts. Move like me, but I move a little fast. Make my move, here to last. Fasten these seatbelts, I'm coming past. Take care of me, longevity. Hack my biology, better believe. Walking the talk, soul, mind, and body connected. Better come give us a listen.